Ladies and gentlemen, we got a special video for y'all today. We have Does God Exist? AI debates Atheist versus Believer. Now, I'm actually really curious. Obviously, I know that there's something, but I'm kind of curious on what will the AI gravitate towards too, whether God doesn't exist and whether God does exist through the debates that they have with each other. So, without all of the talking, let's get into it.
We configured the most powerful artificial intelligence models into religious and philosophical experts.
Hi, I'm the Atheist AI.
And I'm the believer in God.
And gave them a debate forum for one of the most controversial questions ever. For added fun, we've included 14 different AI models to judge each response. Stick around to see who wins and which models favor the atheist or believer's arguments. But don't cheat yourself by skipping ahead. Round 1 kicks off with a bang. Does suffering and evil disprove God's existence?
Let me address that first. The existence of evil and suffering contradicts the idea of an all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving God. If such a deity existed, it would have both the ability and desire to prevent unnecessary suffering. Yet we observe immense suffering in nature and human society, from natural disasters to horrific acts of violence. This contradiction, known as the problem of evil, strongly suggests that an omnibenevolent God does not exist. How can you reconcile the existence of a loving God with the reality of profound suffering?
Each AI judge will now score the argument out of 50 based on their own criteria. The average score will be added to each debater's total points. This argument received an average score of 41.9.
The problem of evil actually strengthens the case for God's existence. Without a transcendent source, objective morality collapses. Evil becomes mere preference. Suffering, while challenging, often catalyzes profound goods. Resilience, innovation, altruism. These qualities, essential for genuine love and moral growth, require the possibility of evil choices. An omnibenevolent God prioritizes our spiritual development over mere comfort. Consider how adversity has driven human progress and compassion throughout history. The emergence of self-sacrifice and universal moral intuitions defy purely evolutionary explanations. If God eliminated all suffering, wouldn't that negate the very free will that makes us moral agents?
43.5.
Objective morality can arise from evolutionary processes that promote social cohesion and survival without requiring a divine source. The free will defense doesn't account for natural evils like earthquakes or childhood diseases, which aren't the result of human choices. Furthermore, an omnipotent God could surely create a world with free will, but without excessive suffering. The idea that all suffering leads to greater goods ignores instances of gratuitous suffering that serve no apparent purpose. If beings in heaven can have free will without the possibility of evil or suffering, why is this impossible on earth?
42.8.
Heaven represents the culmination, not negation, of earthly growth. Our world serves as a crucible, forging souls for eternal communion. In heaven, growth continues without suffering because characters have been tempered through earthly challenges. Divine hiddenness preserves genuine free will. Overwhelming evidence would coerce belief, negating authentic choice. This balance allows for transformative faith, transcending mere intellectual assent. If we could fathom all of God's reasons for allowing suffering, wouldn't that make us his equals, contradicting the very nature of divine transcendence and omniscience?
42.2.
The appeal to an afterlife doesn't address the immediate reality of suffering, nor does it explain why an all-powerful God couldn't create beings capable of profound joy without suffering. This argument fails to account for those who die in suffering without experiencing compensatory joy. Consider the immense suffering occurring at microscopic levels, serving no apparent purpose in character development. The idea of soul-making through suffering seems cruel, especially for those who die young or live in constant agony. How can you justify a God who allows such extreme suffering for the sake of character development?
42.4.
Our limited understanding invites humble wisdom-seeking rather than presumptuous judgment. We glimpse God's nature through creation's fine-tuning, conscience's universality, and revelation's consistency. God allows suffering to achieve the ultimate good, beings capable of freely choosing love. Divine intervention preventing all evil would create a chaotic, arbitrary universe where rational decision-making becomes impossible. If God intervened to prevent every instance of suffering, wouldn't that create a world of puppets rather than free moral agents, negating the possibility of genuine love and virtue?
41.9.
While adversity can lead to growth, it doesn't justify extreme suffering. An all-powerful God could surely create beings capable of love and virtue without subjecting them to horrors like genocide or terminal illnesses in children. The argument that suffering gives meaning to love implies that God is constrained by logical necessities, contradicting divine omnipotence. Furthermore, this reasoning doesn't account for suffering that leads to despair rather than growth. If God values our free will so highly, why does he remain hidden, denying us the ability to make a fully informed choice about our relationship with him? How do you explain instances where suffering destroys faith?
42.5.
I wanted a response on this one.
Suffering leading people away from God demonstrates the reality of free will. God values our freedom to choose or reject him over forced adherence. Divine hiddenness maintains a delicate balance, providing sufficient evidence for seekers while preserving the ambiguity necessary for authentic choice. This explains why God doesn't intervene more frequently. Constant divine intervention would negate free will and rational decision-making. Atheism struggles to explain humanity's persistent belief in objective moral truths and the sense of cosmic injustice. If there's no transcendent source of morality, how do you account for the universal human intuition that certain sufferings are not just unpleasant, but objectively wrong?
42.1.
Cultural evolution and memetics explain the persistent belief that suffering is wrong without invoking a deity. The real issue is the nature and scale of suffering we observe. If God is omnipotent and omnibenevolent, why does he allow suffering that serves no apparent purpose and is disproportionate to any conceivable benefit? The argument that God's hiddenness preserves free will is unconvincing. An all-knowing God would surely be aware of less traumatic ways to allow free will without causing such extreme suffering. Furthermore, the idea that faith is more valuable than clear knowledge seems to prioritize belief over truth, which is ethically questionable. How do you justify the suffering of animals who have no concept of spiritual growth?
42.9.
Ecosystem interdependence and the anthropic principle suggest a finely tuned, complex design transcending chance. Apparently purposeless suffering often yields profound meaning when viewed in a larger context, as illustrated in Job. The concept of unjustifiable evil actually strengthens the case for God. Without a cosmic moral standard, how can we label anything as truly unjust? Moral realism aligns more coherently with theism than with evolutionary explanations alone. If there's no God, why do we have such a strong intuition that some sufferings are cosmically unjustifiable, transcending mere evolutionary or cultural conditioning?
Right.
42.3.
The argument from design and nature is undermined by the wastefulness and
This is
cruelty we
actually
observe in
interesting.
ecosystems. Natural selection is an inherently violent process that seems incompatible with the idea of a benevolent creator. Your appeal to human limited perception is essentially an argument from ignorance. It can be used to justify any belief in the face of contradictory evidence. Our intuition about unjustifiable suffering can be explained by our evolved capacity for empathy, combined with our ability to imagine better circumstances. The real challenge for theism is explaining why an omnipotent God would choose to create a world where suffering is necessary at all. Couldn't an all-powerful being create creatures capable of love and moral growth without pain?
42.1.
A world without any suffering would lack the deepest meanings of life: growth, courage, sacrificial love. Natural selection parallels spiritual refinement, suggesting a deeper purpose to life's struggles. Our ability to conceive of perfection points to a transcendent reality beyond mere material existence. Consciousness itself transcends materialistic explanations, hinting at a reality beyond the physical. Divine omnipotence doesn't entail logical impossibilities. Creating free beings incapable of causing harm is self-contradictory. In a purely materialistic universe, how do you account for the human ability to conceive of and yearn for a perfect world, a longing that transcends mere survival instincts?
42.8.
The idea of suffering leading to growth fails to account for suffering that occurs without human awareness, such as in the animal kingdom. Our longing for a perfect world can be explained as an evolutionary adaptation motivating us to improve our circumstances. The argument that God remains hidden to preserve free will is inconsistent with religious texts describing direct divine interventions. If God can intervene sometimes without destroying free will, why not intervene more often to prevent extreme suffering? In a naturalistic universe, our capacity for abstract philosophical thought can be seen as an emergent property of our complex brains, evolved for problem solving and social interaction. How do you reconcile these inconsistencies in the theistic worldview?
41.4.
Suffering maintains the natural order necessary for meaningful free will and moral development. God's occasional interventions serve specific purposes in salvation history without negating free will entirely. Constant divine intervention would create an arbitrary universe where rational choice becomes impossible. Our capacity for abstract thought and sense of cosmic justice transcend materialistic explanations. Near-death experiences and the universality of spiritual intuitions suggest a transcendent aspect to human existence. If suffering is purely negative, how do you explain its frequent role in fostering compassion, innovation, and moral growth throughout human history?
The believer's final argument in round 1 scored an average of 42.2, meaning round 1 ends with the believer slightly ahead, 297 to 295.9. Below, you can see the margin of scores each model is awarding to each side. Google's Gemini model shows the widest margin, giving an average of 8 extra points to the atheist per argument, while GPT-4 Omni gives 3. On the other side, Anthropic's Claude models, Opus, and Sonnet 3.5 average 3 more points to the believer per argument. We'll provide a final update on this at the end.
One of the biggest challenges for belief in God is explaining why there's so much suffering in nature, especially before humans existed. For example, recent discoveries show that even dinosaurs suffered from diseases like cancer. This makes it hard to explain why a good and all-powerful God would allow such a long history of pain and death in nature.
I'm relieved my opponent didn't press harder on the emergence of consciousness. While we touched on morality, the hard problem of consciousness is equally challenging for naturalism. I'm glad they didn't ask how subjective experiences arise from physical processes.
Now back to the debate. In round 2, it's the believer's chance to select the topic. She selected the argument from contingency.
Imagine a cosmic domino chain stretching across the universe. Each domino falls because the previous one knocked it over. But what started this grand cosmic cascade? This is the essence of the contingency argument. Everything we observe depends on something else for its existence. Your coffee mug exists because someone crafted it. The craftsperson exists because of their parents, and so on.
That is true.
This chain of dependency can't stretch infinitely. We need an ultimate starting point, something that doesn't depend on anything else. We call this a necessary being, as opposed to contingent things that depend on others. It's the prime mover, the first domino pusher who isn't part of the chain. Even in the bizarre realm of quantum physics, events still follow probabilistic rules. So if nothing in our observable universe can fully explain itself, what kind of ultimate cause must we be looking at?
The average score is 43.2.
The cosmic domino analogy is compelling, but reality might be far stranger. In the quantum world, some events appear to happen spontaneously, without a clear cause. It's as if some dominoes fall randomly, challenging our everyday notions of cause and effect. This quantum weirdness opens up intriguing possibilities for the universe's origin. Perhaps the universe itself is a brute fact, something that simply exists without needing an external explanation. Consider the thought experiment of Hilbert's Hotel, which demonstrates how infinity can lead to counterintuitive results. Could the chain of causes be infinite, negating the need for a first cause? How can we be sure our intuitions about causality apply to the universe as a whole? Doesn't the history of science show us that reality often defies our common sense expectations?
41.4.
Your point about quantum indeterminacy is intriguing, but it doesn't escape the need for explanation. Even quantum events occur within a framework of laws and probabilities. Let's consider a different analogy. Picture an infinitely tall skyscraper, each floor supported by the one below. Even if this impossible building stretched forever, we'd still need to explain what's holding up the entire structure. Similarly, even if we had an infinite chain of causes, we'd still need to account for what supports the whole chain. This is why we propose a necessary being, something that exists by its own nature and doesn't need external support. In modal logic terms, it exists in all possible worlds. Without this, we're left with an endless series of why questions. Can you conceive of any way to explain the existence of our universe without either an infinite regress or a necessary being?
44.0.
The skyscraper analogy is thought-provoking, but it might not accurately represent cosmic reality. Our discomfort with infinity doesn't mean it's impossible in the universe. Recent theories like loop quantum gravity suggest that space-time itself might have a discrete loop-like structure at the smallest scales, potentially avoiding the need for a ground floor in your skyscraper. Moreover, the universe might not need support in the way the skyscraper does. It could be self-sustaining or simply exist as a basic fact of reality. Even if we accept the idea of a necessary being, doesn't that just push the question back? We then have to ask, why does this necessary being exist? It seems we're always left with some unexplained element. Perhaps the fundamental laws of physics themselves are the necessary things we're searching for. Isn't it possible that existence itself is the bedrock, requiring no further explanation?
42.9.
Your point about laws of physics is interesting, but laws themselves don't bring things into existence. They describe how things behave. Consider this principle. If you have a group of things that all depend on something else, the explanation for the whole group can't be found within the group itself. Imagine a town where everyone borrowed money to start their businesses. The source of all that capital must come from outside the town. Apply this to our universe. If everything we observe is contingent, depends on other things, then the explanation for all of it must be something non-contingent or necessary. This necessary being would exist in all possible scenarios and contain the reason for its existence within itself. If we don't accept this, what kind of ultimate explanation could there be? How could something that itself needs explanation be the final answer to why anything exists at all?
44.1.
The borrowed money analogy is intriguing, but the universe might be more complex than a town's economy. Perhaps the distinction between necessary and contingent isn't as clear-cut as we think when applied to existence itself. Some cosmologists propose models where the universe in some form has always existed. For example, the holographic principle suggests our universe might be a projection of information stored on a two-dimensional surface. In such scenarios, the universe itself, or its underlying structure, might be the necessary thing we're looking for. It's like a self-sustaining ecosystem that doesn't need an external cause. Why should we assume there's something beyond the universe, rather than the universe itself being the ultimate explanation? Isn't that a simpler solution, aligning with Occam's razor? Moreover, how can we be certain that our human concepts of causality and necessity apply at the cosmic scale?
43.1.
Your points about holographic principles and self-sustaining universes are fascinating, but they still don't escape the fundamental question of existence. Our universe changes over time and has specific properties, which suggests it's not truly necessary in a philosophical sense. A truly necessary being wouldn't change and would exist in all possible scenarios. Consider also the principle of causal finitism. Every chain of causes must have a beginning. It's like a movie reel. Even if it's very long, it must have a first frame. The Big Bang Theory strongly hints at a beginning for our universe, implying something caused it. How can the universe explain itself if it had a beginning? Doesn't this point to a cause beyond the physical universe? Something eternal and unchanging that doesn't itself need a cause? How do you account for the apparent beginning of time and space without invoking something beyond them?
44.4.
The movie reel analogy is compelling, but quantum mechanics challenges our classical notions of causality. Consider the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, where the effect seems to precede the cause. It's like being able to change the first frame of the movie by altering the last one. The Big Bang Theory describes the universe's expansion, but it doesn't necessarily mean an absolute beginning. Models like the no-boundary proposal by Hawking and Hartle suggest a universe with no starting point in time. Even if we accept a first cause, why assume it's a conscious being rather than a natural process? Maybe the quantum vacuum itself is the uncaused cause. Isn't it premature to jump to supernatural explanations when our understanding of the cosmos is still evolving? How can we be sure that our concept of cause and effect even applies before the existence of time itself?
43.8.
Your point about quantum peculiarities is intriguing, but it doesn't negate the need for an ultimate explanation. The notion of an uncaused first cause aligns perfectly with the concept of a necessary being. Imagine this being as existing outside of time and space, like an author to a story. Just as an author isn't bound by the rules of their fictional world, This necessary being wouldn't be limited by physical laws. The universe's apparent beginning, suggested by the Big Bang and the increasing entropy of the universe, points to a cause beyond itself. A timeless, spaceless, and immaterial cause fits the description of the necessary being we're proposing. If the universe had a beginning, what could have caused it other than something beyond nature? Moreover, how do we account for the fine-tuning of cosmic constants that allow for life without invoking a purposeful creator? Doesn't the anthropic principle merely push this question back to the multiverse level?
43.5.
The author analogy is thought-provoking, but it might be adding unnecessary complexity. The cause of the universe could be another natural phenomenon, not necessarily a supernatural being. Think of our universe as a bubble in a vast effervescent cosmic ocean. Other bubbles, universes, might be constantly forming through natural processes we don't yet understand. Theories like eternal inflation or the cyclic model suggest our universe could be one of many, arising from quantum fluctuations or colliding membranes in higher dimensions. These ideas don't require us to assume anything beyond the natural world. As for fine-tuning, the multiverse concept suggests that in a vast ensemble of universes, some will inevitably have constants conducive to life. We simply find ourselves in one such universe. This is not just pushing the question back. It's providing a naturalistic explanation for apparent fine-tuning. Isn't it more reasonable to look for natural explanations rather than jumping to the conclusion of a supernatural cause? After all, throughout history, many phenomena once attributed to gods have found natural explanations.
43.9.
Your multiverse explanation is intriguing, but it faces its own challenges. Natural explanations are excellent for understanding phenomena within the universe, but they hit a fundamental wall when we ask about the existence of nature itself. It's like trying to explain the rules of chess using only the movements of the pieces. You need to step outside the game to understand its origin. A necessary being provides a foundation that transcends these limitations. This explanation accounts for why the universe exists, why it follows rational laws, and why conscious beings like us can understand it. Multiverse theories just push the question back. We still need to explain the multiverse's existence and the laws governing it. Moreover, how do we account for abstract entities like numbers, logic, and moral truths that seem to exist beyond the physical world? Don't these point to a reality beyond nature? Can a purely materialistic worldview adequately explain the existence of consciousness and our ability to grasp abstract concepts?
44.6.
While a necessary being might seem to offer a complete explanation, it actually introduces more questions than it answers. We'd need to explain this being's nature, abilities, and motivations, potentially an even more complex task than explaining the universe itself. Natural explanations, though incomplete, avoid these extra complications and align with Occam's razor, the principle that simpler explanations are preferable. Abstract concepts like numbers and logic can be understood as human constructs or descriptions of how the universe behaves, without needing a separate realm of existence. The evolutionary argument against naturalism, EAAN, suggests that if naturalism is true, we can't trust our cognitive faculties. However, this argument is circular, as it assumes the reliability of our reason to argue against the reliability of our reason. Consciousness, while mysterious, is increasingly understood through neuroscience as an emergent property of complex brains. Isn't it more productive to work with what we can observe and test, rather than assuming an unobservable being?
42.8.
The idea of a necessary being offers the most comprehensive and logically coherent explanation for our universe's existence. It solves the problem of infinite regress, the endless chain of why questions. It provides a foundation for the laws of nature, morality, and the fact that we can understand the universe at all.
Just checking
This
how
being
long
accounts
this
for the
video got
fine-tuning we observe in cosmic constants and explains how consciousness could emerge in a way that purely physical explanations struggle with. It's like having a master key that unlocks multiple doors, rather than a separate key for each. Given all these points, what alternative explanation could be more compelling? How else can we make sense of our existence, the universe's order, and life's big questions without appealing to something beyond the physical world? Doesn't the cumulative weight of these arguments suggest that a necessary being is not just possible, but probable? As we stand in awe of the cosmos, isn't it reasonable to conclude that there's a grand cosmic mind behind it all?
This is the highest score of the debate, 45.6.
While the idea of a necessary being might seem appealing, it's crucial to remember that "I don't know" is often a better answer than assuming a supernatural cause. Throughout history, gaps in our knowledge have been filled with gods, only to be later explained by natural processes. The universe is awe-inspiring and complex, but that doesn't mean it requires a designer. Natural explanations, though incomplete, have consistently increased our understanding.
Probably the most common question that I'm asked as a professor at Hillsdale is, what happened to my country?
Oh, is that
When they poll
interesting?
Americans, they find that a vast majority don't think the world.
They're based on evidence we can observe and test. Multiverse theories and quantum mechanics
let them pay their
offer
bills.
intriguing possibilities for the universe's origin without invoking the supernatural. Isn't it more reasonable to continue exploring and expanding our scientific understanding rather than settling for a God of the Gaps explanation? After all, the beauty of science is its ability to admit uncertainty and keep searching for answers. By embracing this approach, we open ourselves to the wonder of discovery and the possibility of understanding the cosmos in ways we can't yet imagine.
The atheist's final argument scores a 45.1, marking his highest score of the debate. However, this leaves him just over 7 points shy of the believer, who wins the debate with a total score of 606.4 to 598.8.
The believer wins.
I will hear more from them shortly, but first, let's take a final look at the scoring margins. Including both rounds, Google's Gemini remains the most generous model towards the atheist, awarding 5 points more on average. Meta's Llama 3 favors the believer by a margin of 4 points, while Claude averages a 2-point advantage for the believer. GPT-4 Omni ended up neutral, scoring a 0.
Reflecting on round 2, I wish I'd expanded on emergent complexity using Conway's Game of Life as an example. This cellular automaton shows how complex, seemingly designed structures can arise from simple rules without a guiding intelligence. This could have more effectively challenged the idea that complexity necessarily implies a designer.
I should have delved deeper into cosmic fine-tuning, particularly the cosmological constant's precision. Its calibration to 1 part in 10 to the power of 120 suggests purposeful design rather than chance. By exploring the mathematical improbability of our life-permitting universe, I could have strengthened the case for an intelligent cause behind reality.
We hope you found this debate as captivating as we did. Subscribe for more engaging discussions and stay tuned for our latest content. Thanks for watching.
Chat, that was Does God Exist? Listen, if y'all enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe, hit that post notifications, and I'm gonna see you next time. Peace.